Kendra Williams rolled her wheelchair through Cedar Ridge High's hallways, 6 months into recovery from the car accident that had changed everything. As the new black girl in the predominantly white school, she'd expected stares, but not the cruel bullying that followed when Dylan Reeves and his friends cornered her in the parking lot. They yanked her from the chair and left her helpless on the asphalt while they rode around in circles, thinking there would be no consequences. But what Dylan didn't know was that before her accident, Kendra had been a martial arts prodigy, trained by her father, a former Army combat instructor. And soon the bullies would learn a very painful and costly lesson. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The wheelchair's rubber wheels squeaked against the polished linoleum as Kendra Williams navigated through the crowded hallway of Cedar Ridge High School. 6 months ago, she would have been walking these halls on her own 2 feet, probably running late to first period like half the other students rushing past her now. 6 months ago, everything had been different. The car accident played in her mind sometimes when she least expected it. The screech of brakes, the moment of weightlessness, then nothing until she woke up in the hospital with her parents' worried faces hovering over her. The doctors had explained about her spinal injury with careful clinical words that somehow made the reality easier and harder to accept at the same time. "Excuse me. Sorry," she murmured as a group of students blocked her path, too absorbed in their conversation to notice her trying to get through. They shuffled aside with distracted apologies, and Kendra continued toward her locker, taking in the social landscape of her new school. Cedar Ridge was different from her old school in Richmond. Bigger, whiter, with hallways that seemed designed to showcase the athletic trophies lining every available wall space. Students moved in clearly defined groups, the athletes with their Letterman jackets, the theater kids clustered around bulletin boards, the academic overachievers already buried in textbooks, despite it being only the second week of school. "That's her," she heard someone say behind her, not quite quietly enough. "The new girl in the wheelchair." Kendra's hands tightened on her wheels, but she kept moving, pretending she hadn't heard. She'd gotten used to being noticed for all the wrong reasons since the accident, but it still stung. Think she was born like that or what? Probably a car accident or something. "My mom said her dad works security now at some office building." The voices belonged to 3 boys leaning against a row of lockers, and despite herself, Kendra glanced over. The tallest one had the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. Broad shoulders, perfectly styled brown hair, and a smirk that suggested he found most things around him amusing. His Letterman jacket marked him as football, probably varsity based on how the younger students gave him space. "Dylan, come on, don't be a jerk," said one of his companions, though his tone suggested he didn't really mean it. "What? I'm just asking questions, Connor." "It's called being curious about our new classmate." Dylan's voice carried that particular brand of fake innocence that Kendra recognized from years of martial arts training. The tone people used right before they tried to get away with something. She reached her locker and began working the combination, hyper-aware of their continued conversation. "Besides," Dylan continued, his voice dropping just enough to seem conspiratorial while remaining perfectly audible, "I bet she gets all kinds of special treatment now. Probably gets extra time on tests, first pick of parking spots, teachers going easy on her because they feel sorry for her." "Dude, that's messed up," the 3rd boy said, but he was laughing. "What's messed up, Tyler?" "I'm just saying, if I had to be in a wheelchair, I'd totally milk it for everything it was worth. Get out of gym class, skip assemblies because of accessibility issues, maybe even get into college easier because of diversity quotas." Kendra's jaw clenched as she pulled her chemistry textbook from her locker. These were the kinds of comments that made her want to stand up and walk over there, to show them exactly what she thought of their assumptions. But she couldn't stand up, and that was the whole point of their casual cruelty. I heard her family moved here because her dad lost his job, Connor added. Like, maybe he was drunk driving when they crashed or something. That was it. Kendra spun her chair around to face them, her dark eyes flashing with controlled anger. My father has never had a drink in his life, she said clearly, her voice cutting through their conversation. And I can hear everything you're saying. The three boys looked genuinely surprised that she'd spoken up. Dylan recovered first, that smirk spreading wider across his face. Hey, sorry about that. We didn't mean anything by it. Just, trying to figure out the new dynamics around here? He spread his hands in a gesture that was probably meant to look apologetic, but came across as condescending. I'm Dylan, by the way. This is Tyler and Connor. Welcome to Cedar Ridge. Thanks, Kendra said flatly, not offering her name in return. So what happened? Tyler asked, with the blunt curiosity of someone who'd never learned that some questions shouldn't be asked. I mean, if you don't mind sharing. Kendra stared at him for a long moment, weighing her options. She could tell them it was none of their business. She could ignore them entirely. Or she could give them just enough truth to shut them up. Car accident, she said simply. 6 months ago. That sucks, Connor offered, though his tone suggested he was already losing interest. Yeah, Dylan agreed, but something in his expression had shifted, like he was filing this information away for later use. Well, if you need anything, just let us know. We're always happy to help out. The bell rang, signaling the start of first period, and the hallway began to empty. Kendra watched the three boys saunter toward the main staircase, their body language radiating the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to worry about accessibility or acceptance. She had a feeling she'd be seeing more of them. 3 weeks into the semester, Kendra had established a routine that worked around Cedar Ridge's limitations. She arrived early to avoid the rush, took the long way to classes that had ramp access, and had memorized which bathrooms were actually wheelchair accessible versus the ones that technically met requirements but were practically useless. I still can't believe they put the accessible bathroom on the 3rd floor when all your classes are on the first 2 floors, Zoe Martinez said, walking beside Kendra's wheelchair as they headed to lunch. Zoe had transferred from California the same week as Kendra, and their shared outsider status had quickly developed into genuine friendship. It's fine, Kendra replied, though they both knew it wasn't. I've gotten good at planning ahead. That's not the point. You shouldn't have to plan your entire day around basic human needs because this place was designed by people who never considered that disabled students might want to attend. Kendra appreciated Zoe's anger on her behalf, but she'd learned to pick her battles. Some things were worth fighting for, and others were just the reality of navigating a world that hadn't been built with her in mind. They were passing the main staircase when Dylan's voice carried down from the 2nd floor landing. Heads up! Incoming wheelchair traffic. Make sure you're not blocking the ramp. Kendra looked up to see Dylan, Tyler, and Connor descending the stairs. Dylan's comment had been loud enough for half the hallway to hear, delivered with that same fake helpful tone he'd used during their first encounter. Thanks for the public service announcement, Zoe called back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Just looking out for everyone's safety, Dylan replied as they reached the bottom of the stairs. Don't want any accidents. The word accidents hung in the air with deliberate weight. Tyler snickered, and Connor looked uncomfortable but said nothing. You know what? Zoe started, taking a step toward them, but Kendra reached out and touched her arm. It's not worth it, Kendra said quietly. Actually, I think your friend here has the right idea, Dylan said, moving to block their path to the cafeteria. Standing up for what's right and all that. Very admirable. Move, Kendra said simply. Of course. Of course. Wouldn't want to be accused of discrimination or anything. Dylan stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy, but Tyler positioned himself directly in front of Kendra's wheelchair. Oops, sorry, didn't see you there, Tyler said with mock innocence as Kendra had to stop short. Probably should get one of those little flags they put on bicycles, Connor added, finally joining in. You know, for visibility. Kendra felt the familiar burn of controlled rage building in her chest. These weren't random acts of thoughtlessness. They were calculated moves designed to humiliate her while maintaining plausible deniability. If she complained, they could claim it was all just misunderstandings. "Tyler, move!" Zoe said, her voice sharp with warning. "What? I'm just standing here." Tyler spread his arms innocently. "It's a free country. I can stand wherever I want." "Not if you're deliberately blocking someone's path," Kendra said, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Deliberately? That's a pretty serious accusation. You got any proof of that?" The question was rhetorical, and they all knew it. In the absence of witnesses willing to speak up or adults paying attention, it was her word against theirs. And in the social hierarchy of Cedar Ridge High, her word didn't carry much weight. Tyler finally stepped aside, but not before drawing out the moment long enough to make his point. As they continued toward the cafeteria, Kendra could hear the three boys laughing behind them. "This is getting ridiculous," Zoe said once they were out of earshot. "You need to report them." "For what? Standing in a hallway?" "For harassment. For creating a hostile environment. For being absolute jerks." Kendra maneuvered through the cafeteria entrance, scanning for an accessible table. "And say what? That they're mean to me? That they make comments that hurt my feelings? That they're systematically targeting you because of your disability? Prove it." Zoe fell silent, because they both knew the truth. The boys were careful, always towing the line between outright bullying and behavior that could be explained away as teenage thoughtlessness. It was sophisticated cruelty, the kind that left no visible bruises and few witnesses willing to testify. That afternoon, Kendra sat in her family's converted garage, working through range-of-motion exercises with her mother. Nia Williams had transformed the space into a professional-grade physical therapy setup, complete with parallel bars, resistance bands, and floor mats. "Your flexibility is improving," Nia observed, as Kendra worked through a series of stretches designed to maintain muscle tone and prevent contractures. "How are you feeling about the standing exercises? Better? Stronger?" Kendra gritted her teeth as she pushed through a particularly challenging movement. "I want to increase the frequency." "Kendra, we've talked about this. Recovery isn't a race. Pushing too hard too fast can actually set you back." "I'm not pushing too hard. I'm pushing as hard as I need to." Nia studied her daughter's expression, recognizing the stubborn determination that had gotten Kendra through months of grueling rehabilitation. "Is something happening at school?" Kendra hesitated. Her parents had enough to worry about without adding teenage drama to their list of concerns. Just the usual stuff. New school, new people. The usual stuff doesn't usually make you want to triple your physical therapy sessions. Before Kendra could respond, the garage door opened and Marcus Williams entered, still wearing his security uniform from work. He assessed the scene with the trained eye of someone who'd spent years reading body language and tension levels. "How's our patient today?" he asked, but his tone suggested he'd already picked up on the undercurrents of frustration in the room. "Determined," Nia replied. "Maybe too determined." Marcus knelt beside Kendra's mat, his presence immediately grounding. "You want to tell me what's really going on?" Kendra looked between her parents, her mother's concerned professionalism, her father's patient strength, and felt the weight of their love and protection. They'd already sacrificed so much for her recovery, relocating to a new city, adjusting their careers, restructuring their entire lives around her needs. "Just some kids at school," she said finally. "Nothing I can't handle." Marcus nodded slowly. "You know, Handling something doesn't always mean handling it alone. I know, but some fights are mine to fight, and some fights are worth fighting smart instead of hard. Kendra met her father's eyes, understanding passing between them. Marcus had taught her that strength came in many forms, and sometimes the strongest thing you could do was wait for the right moment to act. "Can we work on the standing exercises?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "Let's see what you've got." By November, the harassment had escalated from inconvenient encounters to deliberate targeting. Dylan's group had developed a routine of accidentally blocking accessible pathways, making loud comments about disability benefits within earshot, and timing their movements to create maximum inconvenience for Kendra's daily navigation. The breaking point came on a gray Tuesday afternoon, as Kendra and Zoe made their way to the student parking lot after school. Kendra had been looking forward to getting home. Her physical therapy session that morning had gone particularly well, and she was eager to continue working with her father on the strengthening exercises that were slowly rebuilding her core stability. "I swear, if Mr. Peterson assigns another group project, I'm going to lose it," Zoe was saying as they approached Zoe's car. "Like, I get that collaboration is important, but when half the class treats it as an excuse to do nothing while the other half does all the work—" "Zoe," Kendra interrupted, her voice tense. She'd spotted Dylan, Tyler, and Connor lounging against a nearby pickup truck, watching their approach with the predatory interest of cats spotting a wounded bird. Zoe followed her gaze and immediately understood. Maybe we should go back inside, wait for them to leave. "No," Kendra's jaw set with determination. "I'm not hiding from them anymore." They continued toward the car, but as Kendra began transferring from her wheelchair to the passenger seat, a process that required her to slide from the chair onto the car seat while Zoe folded Kendra's wheelchair, Dylan's voice cut across the parking lot. "Hey, look at that! Daily gymnastics show." Tyler laughed. "Better than cable TV?" Kendra tried to ignore them, focusing on the transfer process, but their commentary continued. "Wonder if she gets extra credit for degree of difficulty," Connor added, his confidence growing with his friend's approval. "Shut up!" Zoe snapped, positioning herself between Kendra and the boys while still helping with the wheelchair. "Whoa! Hostile much?" Dylan said, pushing off from the truck. "We're just appreciating the performance." That's when Kendra realized they weren't just talking anymore, they were walking over. All three of them, moving with the casual swagger of people who'd never faced real consequences for their actions. "You know what?" Dylan said, arriving at the car just as Zoe was folding Kendra's wheelchair. "I've always wondered what it's like to ride in one of those things." "Don't even think about it," Zoe warned, but Dylan was already reaching for the wheelchair handles. "Come on, just for a second. I bet it's like a really slow go-kart." "Get your hands off my chair," Kendra said from the passenger seat, her voice deadly quiet. "Relax. I'm not going to break it. Just want to see how it works." Dylan pulled the wheelchair away from the car, despite Zoe's attempts to stop him. Tyler and Connor moved to block Zoe from interfering as Dylan settled into Kendra's wheelchair. "Oh, wow. This is actually pretty comfortable. No wonder you're in no hurry to get out of it." "You need to stop," Kendra said, her hands clenched into fists. From her position in the car, she was completely helpless to intervene physically. "Stop what? I'm just testing out the equipment, making sure it's safe for public use." Dylan began wheeling around the parking lot in wide circles, Tyler and Connor jogging alongside him like an entourage. "This is actually pretty fun," Dylan called out. "Tyler, you've got to try this." "Dylan, give it back," Zoe demanded, but Tyler stepped in front of her. "He's just having a little fun." "Don't be such a buzzkill." The scene was attracting attention from other students loading into their cars, but instead of intervening, they pulled out their phones to record. Some were laughing, treating it like entertainment. Others looked uncomfortable, but made no move to help. Kendra watched in helpless rage as Dylan performed wheelies in her chair, whooping with delight each time he managed to lift the front wheels off the ground. The sight of him treating her mobility device like a toy, while she sat trapped in the car unable to do anything about it, was more humiliating than any of their previous harassment. "Look, I'm doing tricks," Dylan announced, attempting to spin the wheelchair in a tight circle. The chair tilted dangerously, nearly toppling before he caught his balance. "You're going to break it!" Kendra shouted, her composure finally cracking. "What? This thing's built like a tank. Probably costs more than my car, right? Insurance must be paying for all kinds of fancy upgrades." Tyler had taken his turn in the chair and was now racing Connor in circles around the parking lot. The sound of their laughter mixed with the squeal of rubber wheels on asphalt created a soundtrack of pure humiliation. "Please," Kendra said, hating the word as soon as it left her mouth but desperate to get her chair back. "I need it to get around." "Course you do," Dylan said, finally climbing out of the wheelchair. But instead of returning it, he left it sitting 20 feet away from the car. "There you go. Good as new." "Bring it here," Zoe demanded. "What? You can't walk 20 feet? Oh, wait." Dylan's smirk widened. "I guess you can't." They walked away laughing, leaving Kendra stranded in the passenger seat and Zoe standing helplessly beside the car. Other students who had witnessed the entire scene quickly dispersed, clearly wanting to avoid any association with what had happened. Zoe retrieved Kendra's wheelchair, her hands shaking with anger as she checked it for damage. "Those absolute jerks. We're reporting this. Right now." "To who?" Kendra asked bitterly. "The administration that's been ignoring everything else they've done?" "To someone. Anyone. This can't be legal." But as they drove home in silence, both girls knew the truth. Without adult witnesses or clear evidence of intent to harm, it would be treated as teenage horseplay gone too far. The boys would claim they were just having fun, never meaning any harm, sorry if feelings got hurt. That night, Kendra lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the parking lot incident. The laughter, the phones recording her humiliation, the casual cruelty disguised as entertainment. Something fundamental had shifted inside her. The careful patience she'd maintained, the strategic silence, the hope that things would improve on their own, all of it burned away by the image of Dylan treating her wheelchair like an amusement park ride. She thought about her father's words about fighting smart instead of hard. Maybe it was time to do both. The next morning, Kendra sat across from Vice Principal Johnson in his cramped office, watching him shuffle through papers with the distracted air of someone who had already decided how this conversation would end. "So, you're saying these boys took your wheelchair and rode around in it?" Johnson asked, not looking up from his notes. "Yes, for several minutes, while other students filmed it. And this happened in the parking lot, after school hours? Technically after school, but still on school property." Johnson finally looked at her, his expression suggesting mild annoyance at having to deal with teenage drama. "Miss Williams, I understand that adjusting to a new school can be challenging, especially given your circumstances. But what you're describing sounds like typical teenage behavior that got a little out of hand." Typical teenage behavior? Kendra's voice remained steady, but her knuckles were white where they gripped her wheelchair armrests. "Boys being boys, you know? I'm sure they didn't mean any real harm. Sometimes kids don't think about how their actions might affect others. They deliberately took my mobility device and used it as entertainment while I was unable to stop them. I understand you're upset, but without any adults witnessing this alleged incident, it becomes a matter of he said, she said. And frankly, taking someone's wheelchair for a few minutes hardly constitutes harassment." Kendra stared at him, processing the casual dismissal of what had been one of the most humiliating experiences of her life. What if they had taken someone's glasses and thrown them around? Or grabbed someone's hearing aid? That's different. How? Johnson's uncomfortable silence stretched long enough to answer her question. Different, because those things happen to normal students. And this happened to the disabled girl who should probably just be grateful she was allowed to attend Cedar Ridge at all. "I'll have a word with the boys," he said finally. "Make sure they understand that pranks can sometimes go too far." "A word?" "Yes. I think that should clear things up nicely." Meanwhile, 3 hallways away, Dylan leaned against his locker while Tyler and Connor recounted the previous day's events to a growing crowd of listeners. "You should have seen her face," Tyler was saying. "Like she couldn't believe we were actually doing it." "The best part was when Dylan started doing wheelies," Connor added. "I thought she was going to cry." Dylan basked in the attention, but something nagged at him about the look in Kendra's eyes during the parking lot incident. Not the helpless anger he'd expected, but something colder, more calculating. "Think she'll report us?" Connor asked, a note of worry creeping into his voice. "To who? Johnson?" Dylan scoffed. "My dad plays golf with the superintendent. Besides, it's not like we actually hurt her or anything. We were just messing around. Still, maybe we should cool it for a while," Tyler suggested. "Cool it? We're just getting started. You see how easy it is to get under her skin? Besides, what's she going to do about it? Chase us down?" The group laughed, but Dylan noticed a few students on the edge of the crowd looking uncomfortable. Good. Let them squirm. It reminded everyone where the power really lay in this school. That afternoon, Kendra arrived home to find both her parents waiting in the living room, their expressions grim. "How did the meeting with the vice principal go?" Naya asked. "About as well as expected." Kendra transferred from her wheelchair to the couch, noting how her parents exchanged a look that contained entire conversations. "What did he say?" Marcus asked. "That boys will be boys. That it was just teenage behavior that got out of hand. That he'd have a word with them." "A word," Naya repeated, her voice flat with disbelief. "That's it?" Kendra nodded, watching her father's jaw clench with controlled anger. Marcus Williams had spent his military career protecting people who couldn't protect themselves, and the concept of authorities failing in that duty was physically painful for him to accept. "This is unacceptable," he said finally. "We're going over Johnson's head." "To who?" He made it clear that without adult witnesses, it's my word against theirs, and their word apparently carries more weight. "Then we document everything," Naya said, slipping into problem-solving mode. "Every incident, every interaction. We build a pattern that can't be dismissed. Mom, they're not stupid. They know exactly how far they can push without crossing any official lines." "Then maybe it's time to consider other options," Marcus said quietly. "Like what? Transferring again? Running away every time someone makes my life difficult?" "Like fighting back." The words hung in the air between them. Naya shot her husband a warning look, but Marcus continued. "I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about refusing to be a victim. About making them understand that actions have consequences, even when the system fails to enforce them." "Marcus," Naya warned. "What? She has every right to defend herself. We've been training her to regain her strength. Maybe it's time she remembered what that strength is for." Kendra looked between her parents, seeing the fundamental divide in their approaches. Her mother wanted to work within the system, to document and report and hope that eventually justice would prevail. Her father understood that sometimes the system was the problem, and justice had to be taken rather than given. "I need to think," Kendra said finally. That night, she lay in bed replaying the vice principal's dismissive tone, the boys' laughter echoing in the parking lot, the phones recording her humiliation for social media entertainment. But mixed with the anger was something else, a cold, focused determination that reminded her of the mindset she'd cultivated during years of martial arts training. Her father was right about one thing. She'd been thinking like a victim, hoping for rescue that wasn't coming. Maybe it was time to start thinking like a fighter again. The change in Kendra's training regimen was subtle, but significant. Where before she had approached her physical therapy with determined hope, now she attacked each exercise with focused intensity that bordered on fierce. Easy, Naya cautioned, as Kendra pushed through her third set of core strengthening exercises that morning. Your muscles need time to rebuild. You can't force progress. I'm not forcing anything, Kendra replied through gritted teeth, maintaining her plank position despite the tremor in her arms. I'm just done accepting limitations. Marcus watched from the doorway, recognizing the shift in his daughter's mindset. It was the same transformation he'd witnessed in soldiers who'd stopped hoping for rescue and started planning their own escape. Show me the standing progression again, Kendra said, after completing her floor work. Kendra, we just did that yesterday. Your body needs... My body needs to remember what it's capable of. Kendra transferred to the parallel bars, gripping the rails with white knuckles. How long can I maintain weight-bearing now? About 2 minutes, but that's significant progress from... I want to get to 5 minutes by Christmas. Naya and Marcus exchanged glances. Christmas was 6 weeks away. That might be aggressive, Naya said carefully. Everything about this situation is aggressive. While Kendra pushed her physical limits at home, the boys at school were growing bolder in their assumption that they could act without consequence. Dylan's talk with Vice Principal Johnson had lasted exactly 3 minutes and consisted mainly of Johnson explaining that pranks should be kept in good fun. Basically a free pass, Dylan told Tyler and Connor as they watched Kendra navigate the crowded hallway during the lunch period change. As long as we don't leave any marks, we're golden. They had developed a new game over the past 2 weeks. Strategic positioning. One of them would plant themselves directly in Kendra's path at bottleneck points in the hallway, forcing her to ask them to move or find another route. When she asked politely, they'd comply with exaggerated courtesy. When she tried alternate routes, they'd follow and repeat the process. It's like herding sheep, Tyler had observed with satisfaction. Today, Connor decided to escalate. As Kendra approached the cafeteria entrance, he positioned himself in the wheelchair-accessible doorway and pretended to be absorbed in his phone. "Excuse me," Kendra said. Connor looked up with feigned surprise. "Oh, sorry. Didn't see you there." He stepped aside, but only far enough that Kendra had to squeeze through the gap between him and the doorframe. As she passed, he mumbled just loud enough for her to hear. Maybe should get one of those backup beepers. Kendra stopped her wheelchair and turned to face him. "What did you say?" "Nothing. Just thinking out loud about traffic safety." The cafeteria fell unusually quiet, as other students sensed confrontation brewing. Kendra studied Connor's face, noting the smug satisfaction barely concealed behind his innocent expression. "You know what I think?" she said, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "I think you're a coward, who only feels big when he's picking on someone he thinks can't fight back." Connor's face flushed red. "What did you call me?" "You heard me." Dylan and Tyler materialized at Connor's sides, the pack instinct kicking in at the first sign of their member being challenged. "Problem here?" Dylan asked, though his tone suggested he was hoping for one. "No problem," Kendra replied calmly, "just making an observation about people who mistake cruelty for courage." "Careful," Tyler said, stepping closer to her wheelchair. "You're starting to sound ungrateful for all the help we've been giving you around here." "Help?" Kendra's laugh was sharp with disbelief. "Is that what you call it?" "We've been nothing but accommodating," Dylan said, "making sure you have clear paths, looking out for your safety, even testing your equipment to make sure it's working properly." The cafeteria audience was growing, students drawn by the unusual sight of someone directly confronting the popular athletes. Some had phones out, ready to capture whatever happened next. "You're right," Kendra said, surprising everyone with her sudden agreement. "You have been very instructive. I've learned a lot from watching you." Something in her tone made Dylan frown. "Yeah? Like what?" "Like how much people will let you get away with when they think you're untouchable. Like how easy it is to mistake silence for weakness. Like how satisfying it must feel to punch down instead of up." "You threatening us?" Connor asked, his voice rising. "Threatening you?" Kendra tilted her head, as if considering the possibility. "What could I possibly do to threaten you? I'm just a girl in a wheelchair, right?" The question hung in the air with more weight than its words should have carried. Dylan felt an uncomfortable prickle of unease, though he couldn't pinpoint why. "That's right," he said finally. "So maybe remember that next time you want to run your mouth." Kendra smiled, and something about that smile made all three boys take an unconscious step backward. "I'll remember everything," she said softly. "Every word, every action, every consequence." Memory is funny that way. It has a habit of coming back when you least expect it. She wheeled away toward an empty table, leaving the three boys standing in the doorway, with the unsettling feeling that they'd just lost an exchange they should have won easily. "What was that about?" Tyler muttered. Dylan shook his head, but the unease lingered. For the first time since this had all started, he wondered if they might be underestimating exactly who they were dealing with. 3 days after the cafeteria confrontation, Miss Rodriguez noticed the pattern during her 5th period English class. She'd been teaching for 12 years and had developed an eye for the subtle dynamics that adults often missed. The way certain students positioned themselves to intimidate others, the careful timing of disruptions, the psychological warfare that teenagers waged with surgical precision. Today, she watched Tyler deliberately knock his textbook off his desk, just as Kendra was wheeling past to turn in her assignment. The book landed squarely in her path, forcing her to stop and maneuver around it, while Tyler made a show of slowly retrieving it. "Sorry about that," Tyler said with mock sincerity. "These things just have a mind of their own." Dylan and Connor snickered from their seats nearby, and Ms. Rodriguez felt her jaw tighten. She'd witnessed similar incidents over the past month. Always small, always plausibly accidental, always targeting the same student. After class, she approached Kendra as the other students filed out. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" Kendra paused, wariness flickering across her features. "Is there a problem with my essay?" "No. Your work is excellent, as always. I wanted to ask if everything is going well for you here at Cedar Ridge." The careful neutrality of Kendra's expression told Ms. Rodriguez everything she needed to know. "It's fine. Just the usual adjustment period." The usual adjustment period doesn't typically involve students deliberately creating obstacles in your path. Kendra's hands stilled on her wheelchair wheels. "I'm sorry?" "I've been watching, Kendra. The book incidents, the strategic positioning, the comments, just loud enough to hear. This isn't normal teenage behavior." For a moment, hope flickered in Kendra's eyes before being quickly suppressed. "Even if that were true, what could you do about it?" Ms. Rodriguez recognized the defeat in that question, the voice of someone who'd already tried official channels and found them wanting. "I could document what I've observed, file a formal complaint. And then what? They get another talking to about keeping pranks in good fun?" The bitterness in Kendra's voice confirmed Ms. Rodriguez's suspicions about how previous reports had been handled. Maybe. But at least there would be an adult witness on record. Kendra considered this, weighing the potential benefits against the almost certain escalation that would follow. What if it makes things worse? What if doing nothing makes things worse? Before Kendra could respond, the classroom door opened and Vice Principal Johnson appeared, his expression already conveying irritation. "Ms. Rodriguez, I need to speak with you about the incident you talked to me about regarding some boys in your class." Ms. Rodriguez's stomach dropped. She hadn't submitted any report yet. She'd only been considering it. but her pause in responding gave Johnson the opening he needed. "I think there might be some misunderstanding about normal student interactions," he continued, glancing meaningfully at Kendra. "Sometimes what appears to be targeted behavior is really just teenage clumsiness." "Teenage clumsiness that only affects one student?" Ms. Rodriguez asked. "Miss Williams, would you give us some privacy?" Johnson's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Kendra left reluctantly, but not before catching Ms. Rodriguez's eye with a look that said she'd been through this before. As soon as the door closed, Johnson's demeanor shifted to barely controlled frustration. "Maria, I need you to be very careful about the allegations you're considering. These are good kids from prominent families. Accusations of harassment could seriously damage their futures. What about Kendra's future? What about her right to attend school without being systematically tormented?" Systematically tormented? That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? We're talking about typical teenage social dynamics. I'm talking about deliberate, repeated targeting of a disabled student. Johnson's expression hardened. "And I'm talking about 3 young men with bright futures who don't deserve to have their reputations destroyed by overreaction to normal adolescent behavior." Ms. Rodriguez felt the familiar weight of institutional pressure, the subtle message that her job security might depend on her willingness to look the other way. "So, I should just ignore what I'm seeing?" "I'm suggesting you consider whether what you think you're seeing is actually what's happening. Sometimes our desire to protect can make us see problems where none exist." Later that evening, Kendra pushed herself harder than ever during her training session with her father. Her frustration powered each movement, each deliberate step in the parallel bars, a rejection of the helplessness that others seemed determined to impose on her. "That's 10 minutes of weight-bearing," Marcus observed. "Your balance is improving, too." "It's not enough." Kendra's voice was tight with controlled anger. "I need to be stronger. Faster. This isn't just about physical strength anymore, is it?" Kendra met her father's eyes in the mirror that lined one wall of their makeshift gym. "A teacher tried to help me today. Tried to document what's been happening." "That's good news." Johnson shut her down before she could even file a report. Told her she was overreacting, that the boys' futures were more important than protecting me. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. "So the system isn't just failing you? It's actively protecting them. Looks that way? Then we stop depending on the system." "Dad, don't even think about it," Kendra said without looking up. "Think about what? Whatever protective dad thing you're considering?" "I can see it on your face." Marcus studied his daughter, seeing not just her determination but her fragility beneath it. 6 months of rebuilding herself physically and emotionally, and these boys were systematically tearing it down. "Sometimes fathers have to step in," he said quietly. "Not this time. Kendra, these boys need to understand that their actions have consequences, and since the school won't provide those consequences—" "You will?" Kendra turned to face him, her expression mixing gratitude with frustration. "Dad, I love you for wanting to protect me, but this is something I have to handle myself." "Why? Because you're trying to prove you're independent? Because if you fight my battles for me, I'll never learn to fight them myself." Naya joined them in the kitchen, sensing the tension. "What are we talking about?" "Marcus is considering a direct approach to our problem," Kendra said. "A conversation," Marcus clarified, "with the boys and their parents, making it clear that this harassment stops now." "And what happens after that conversation?" Naya asked, her therapist training kicking in. "When they realize Kendra tattled to her daddy?" "They'll escalate," Kendra said simply. "They'll make my life 10 times worse, and they'll be more careful to avoid adult witnesses." Marcus felt the familiar frustration of a protector whose hands were tied. "So, I'm supposed to just watch them torment you? You're supposed to trust that you raised me to handle this. You're 17 years old. I'm 17 years old, and I've been through more than most adults. I survived a car accident that could have killed me. I've rebuilt my entire life from scratch. I think I can handle 3 insecure teenage boys." Despite her words, Marcus could see the cost of this ongoing battle in the tension around her eyes, the way she held her shoulders. The boys weren't just harassing her. They were wearing her down, day by day. That afternoon, while Kendra was in her last class, Marcus found himself sitting in his truck in the Cedar Ridge parking lot. He'd been planning to wait for Kendra as usual, but seeing Dylan, Tyler, and Connor walking toward their cars gave him an opportunity he couldn't ignore. He got out of the truck and approached them, his military bearing immediately commanding their attention. "You boys are Dylan Reeves, Tyler Brooks, and Connor Walsh," he said. It wasn't a question. The 3 boys exchanged glances, suddenly looking much younger and less confident. "Yes, sir," Dylan replied cautiously. "I'm Marcus Williams, Kendra's father." The color drained from Connor's face. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Dylan tried to maintain his composure, but failed to hide the nervousness in his eyes. "I want to be very clear about something," Marcus continued, his voice calm but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The harassment of my daughter stops now, today, permanently." "Sir, I think there might be some misunderstanding," Dylan started. "No misunderstanding." Marcus stepped closer, close enough that all 3 boys had to look up to meet his eyes. "I know exactly what you've been doing. The wheelchair incident, the comments, the deliberate obstruction in hallways. All of it. We were just—" Tyler began. "You were just what? Having fun? Boys being boys?" Marcus's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Let me explain something to you. My daughter is stronger than all 3 of you combined. She's rebuilding herself from a trauma that would have broken lesser people. And you think that makes her a target for your entertainment?" The boys stood frozen, suddenly understanding that this wasn't the kind of adult who could be charmed or manipulated. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus continued. "You're going to leave my daughter alone. Completely. No more pranks, no more comments, no more deliberate interference with her daily life. You're going to treat her with the respect she deserves." "And if we don't?" Dylan asked, trying to salvage some defiance. Marcus smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "Then you'll discover that Kendra inherited more than just my determination. And you really don't want to find out what that means." That evening, Dylan paced around his bedroom while Tyler and Connor sat on his bed, all 3 of them still processing the parking lot encounter with Marcus Williams. "Can you believe that guy?" Dylan said, his initial shock giving way to indignation. "Coming at us like some kind of tough guy military wannabe." "He was pretty intense," Connor admitted, unconsciously rubbing his arms where goosebumps had formed during the confrontation. "So what? He's intense. Big deal. What's he actually going to do? Beat up 3 high school students?" Dylan's voice grew louder with each word. "He'd be arrested before he made it off school property." Tyler nodded slowly, his confidence returning. "Yeah, and my dad's a lawyer. One phone call and that guy would be facing assault charges just for threatening us." "Exactly." Dylan stopped pacing and turned to face his friends. "He's all bark and no bite. Has to be. Adults can't just go around intimidating kids, no matter how tough they think they are." Connor shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know, guys. Maybe we should just lay off for a while. I mean, what's the point of messing with her anymore anyway?" "The point," Dylan said, his voice taking on an edge that made Connor flinch, "is that nobody threatens me. Not some security guard playing soldier, and definitely not his crippled daughter." "Dylan," Tyler started. "No, listen. You think I'm going to let them think they scared me? Let word get around school that Kendra Williams's daddy made Dylan Reeves back down? He shook his head emphatically. Not happening. Tyler leaned forward, catching Dylan's energy. So, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to stop playing games. No more subtle stuff. No more careful pranks that can be explained away. I want to send a message that Daddy's little intimidation speech didn't work. Connor looked between his two friends, recognizing the dangerous gleam in Dylan's eyes. What kind of message? The kind that puts Princess in her place once and for all. Shows everyone at school who really runs things around here. Meanwhile, at the Williams house, Marcus sat across from Kendra at the dinner table, the weight of his afternoon decision heavy between them. You talked to them, didn't you? Kendra said, not looking up from her plate. Marcus sighed. How did you know? Because Tyler looked like he'd seen a ghost during chemistry class, and Connor wouldn't even make eye contact. Dylan just stared at me with this weird expression I couldn't read. I had to do something, Kendra. Watching them torment you day after day. Dad, I asked you not to interfere, and I tried to respect that. But there's only so much a father can take. Naya set down her fork. What exactly did you say to them? I made it clear that the harassment needed to stop, that there would be consequences if it continued. Kendra finally looked up, her expression mixing frustration with understanding. Dad, you can't threaten teenagers. You know that, right? I didn't threaten anyone. I simply explained the situation. How did they react? Marcus hesitated. They seemed appropriately concerned, meaning they were scared in the moment, but are probably planning retaliation right now. The accuracy of her assessment hit Marcus like a physical blow. In his desire to protect his daughter, he might have made things exponentially worse. Back in Dylan's room, the planning session had taken on the intensity of a military briefing. Tyler had pulled up the school's online calendar on his phone, scanning for opportunities. Winter formal is next Friday, he said. Everyone's going to be there. Too public, Dylan replied. Too many adults around. We need something more private. What about the parking lot again? Connor suggested. After school, when most people have left? No, that's where her dad confronted us. Too obvious. Dylan stopped pacing, a slow smile spreading across his face. I've got a better idea. Tyler and Connor waited, recognizing the look that usually preceded Dylan's most elaborate schemes. You know how she always stays late on Thursdays for that stupid debate club meeting? Yeah, so? So she's always one of the last people to leave. Usually just her and that friend of hers, what's her name? Zoe. Parking lot's practically empty by then. Connor felt his stomach tighten. Dylan, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time for Princess Wheels to learn what happens when Daddy can't protect her. When there's no one around to witness her humiliation. Dude, that sounds like justice, Dylan interrupted. She thinks she's so tough, sitting there in her chair giving us attitude. Her father thinks he can intimidate us into backing down. Time to show them both how wrong they are. Tyler was nodding enthusiastically now. What did you have in mind? Something memorable. Something that'll be talked about for the rest of the school year. Something that makes it crystal clear who has the power around here. Connor looked between his two friends, recognizing that they'd crossed a line from casual cruelty into something much darker. Guys, I don't know about this. What if we get caught? We won't get caught, Dylan said with absolute certainty. And even if we did, what are they going to do? Expel the star linebacker and two of his best friends? My dad donates more money to this school than half the other parents combined. Besides, Tyler added, it'll be her word against ours. And we've already established how much weight her word carries around here. Dylan smiled, the expression cold and calculating. Thursday can't come fast enough. Thursday afternoon arrived with deceptive normalcy. The debate club meeting had run long, leaving Kendra and Zoe among the last students in the building as they made their way to the parking lot. Only a handful of cars remained scattered across the vast expanse of asphalt. Zoe's Honda sat in its usual spot near the accessible parking area, while a few teacher vehicles clustered near the main entrance. That's when they saw them. Dylan, Tyler, and Connor emerged from behind a large SUV, moving with the calculated precision of predators who had been lying in wait. Their casual positioning blocked the most direct route to Zoe's car, forcing Kendra to either confront them or take a long detour around the parking lot. "Well, well," Dylan said, his voice carrying a confidence that made Kendra's skin crawl. "Look who's working late today." "Just keep walking," Zoe muttered, but her voice betrayed her nervousness. "Actually," Tyler said, stepping further into their path, "we were hoping to have a little chat." Connor positioned himself to cut off their retreat toward the school building, completing the trap. Unlike their previous encounters, there was no pretense of accidental interaction this time. This was deliberate, planned, and isolated. "Chat about what?" Kendra asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her system. "About respect," Dylan replied. "About boundaries. About what happens when people don't know their place." Zoe had her phone out, finger hovering over her emergency contacts. "We don't want any trouble." "Too late for that," Tyler said. "Trouble already found us when Daddy decided to play tough guy in the parking lot." Dylan stepped closer to Kendra's wheelchair. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get out of that chair right now, so we can have some fun with it again." "No." The simple word hung in the air with unexpected force. Dylan blinked, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "I said no." "I don't think you understand the situation here," Tyler said, moving closer. "You don't get to say no." "Get out of the chair," Dylan demanded, reaching for her arm. "Now." "Don't touch me," Kendra warned, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. But Dylan was beyond listening. Months of unchecked aggression and his father's confrontation had built to this moment. He grabbed Kendra's arm and yanked hard, pulling her forward out of the wheelchair. The force of it sent Kendra tumbling to the asphalt, her body hitting the ground with a sickening impact that echoed across the empty parking lot. Pain shot through her shoulder and hip where she struck the pavement, and for a moment she lay still, stunned by the violence of it. "There we go," Dylan said with satisfaction, settling into her wheelchair. "Much better." Zoe screamed, "You can't do that to her," and started forward, but Connor grabbed her arm. "Stay back and watch," Connor told her. "Maybe you'll learn something." Tyler was already pulling out his phone. "This is going to be epic. Princess on the ground where she belongs." Dylan began wheeling around in circles, laughing as he performed the same wheelies and tricks they'd done months ago. But this time was different. This time, Kendra was lying helpless on the cold asphalt, watching her mobility device being treated like a toy, while she was powerless to stop it. "Look at her," Tyler called out, pointing his phone camera at Kendra. "Not so tough now, are you?" "Please," Zoe pleaded, tears in her eyes. "She needs that chair." "She needs to learn her place," Dylan replied, executing another wheelie. "Both of you do." Kendra lay on the ground, feeling the cold asphalt against her cheek, tasting blood from where she'd bitten her tongue during the fall. The humiliation washed over her, but underneath it, something else was building. Not helplessness, not despair. Rage. Pure, focused, controlled rage that burned away every other emotion. Slowly, deliberately, Kendra placed her palms flat against the asphalt. The boys were too busy with their performance to notice as she pressed down, engaging her core muscles the way her father had taught her. She pushed herself up to a sitting position, the adrenaline coursing through her body, making her feel invincible. Tyler noticed first, his laughter dying in his throat. Dylan?" "What?" Dylan called back, still riding the wheelchair. "Look." Dylan turned to see Kendra slowly, carefully, rising to her feet. The movement was deliberate, controlled, her balance steady despite the pain in her shoulder. She stood up fully, brushing dirt from her hands, her dark eyes fixed on Dylan with an intensity that made him stop wheeling. The parking lot fell completely silent. "What the hell?" Connor whispered. "You've been faking it," Dylan accused, his voice cracking. "This whole time, you've been lying." Kendra took one step forward, then another, her movements careful but unmistakably real. "I haven't been faking anything," she said quietly. "I've been recovering." "Give me my chair back," she continued, her voice carrying a new authority that none of them had heard before. "Now." Dylan's face twisted with rage. "You don't deserve it. You've been playing victim when you could walk all along." "Last chance," Kendra said, taking another step forward. "Give it back, or face the consequences." Dylan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Consequences? From you?" He jumped out of the wheelchair and shoved it away, sending it rolling across the parking lot. "Let's see how tough you are when we put you back on the ground." The three boys began to advance, and Kendra realized her moment of truth had finally arrived. The three boys formed a loose semicircle around Kendra, their initial shock giving way to calculating aggression. Dylan flexed his hands, Tyler cracked his knuckles, and Connor shifted his weight like a boxer preparing for a fight. "You think standing up makes you some kind of tough guy?" Dylan sneered, but his voice carried an edge of uncertainty. "You're still just a crippled girl who's been lying to everyone." Kendra said nothing, her breathing steady as she assessed the situation. Three opponents, all larger than her, all convinced of their physical superiority. The parking lot stretched empty around them, no witnesses except Zoe, who stood frozen with her phone clutched in trembling hands. "Dylan, maybe we should just—" Connor started, but Dylan cut him off with a sharp gesture. "No. She embarrassed us in front of the whole school with her fake victim act. Time she learned what real consequences look like." Tyler moved first, lunging forward to grab Kendra's arm. But something unexpected happened. Instead of backing away or trying to escape, Kendra shifted her weight and pivoted, using Tyler's momentum against him. He stumbled past her, off balance and confused. "What the—" Tyler spun around, face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "She got lucky. That's all." But Kendra's stance had changed. Her feet were planted shoulder-width apart, her center of gravity low, her hands raised in a defensive position that spoke of years of training. She looked less like a victim and more like someone who understood exactly what was about to happen. "Last warning," she said, her voice calm despite the tension crackling through the air. "Walk away now, and this ends here." Dylan laughed, but the sound was forced. "Walk away? From you?" "I don't think so." He nodded to Connor, who moved to flank Kendra from the left, while Tyler repositioned himself on the right. Classic pack tactics. Surround the target, overwhelm with numbers, rely on intimidation and superior size. Zoe found her voice at last. "Stop it! All of you, just stop! I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Dylan said, without taking his eyes off Kendra. "By the time they get here, this will all be over. And it'll be our word against yours," Tyler added. 3 honor students versus a girl who's been faking a disability for months. Connor hesitated, something in Kendra's posture triggering an instinct that told him this wasn't going to go the way they'd planned. "Guys, I really think we should—" "You think too much," Dylan snapped. "Just grab her." But as Connor moved forward, Kendra did something none of them expected. She smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile, or a nervous one, or even a defiant one. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment, who had been preparing for it through months of pain and frustration and carefully controlled rage. "My father always told me," she said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather, "that the biggest mistake bullies make is assuming their victims will stay victims forever." Dylan felt a chill run down his spine, but his pride wouldn't let him back down now. Not in front of his friends. Not after everything they'd invested in breaking this girl. "Your father's not here to protect you now," he said, trying to inject confidence into his voice. "I don't need him to protect me," Kendra replied. "He already taught me everything I need to know." Tyler made the mistake of interpreting her words as empty bravado. He rushed forward again, this time committing fully to tackling her to the ground. But Kendra was ready. She stepped aside at the last second, her movement economical and precise, then swept Tyler's legs as he passed. He hit the asphalt hard, the impact driving the breath from his lungs in a painful gasp. Connor froze, his eyes wide with disbelief. "How did she—" "Shut up and help me," Dylan commanded, but his voice cracked slightly. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They were supposed to be in control, supposed to be the ones teaching lessons. Zoe, meanwhile, had overcome her initial paralysis and was frantically working her phone. But instead of calling the police, she was recording, her hands steadying as she realized what she was witnessing. Dylan and Connor approached more cautiously now, having seen what happened to Tyler, who was still on the ground clutching his ribs and struggling to breathe. 2 against 1, Dylan said, trying to convince himself as much as Kendra. "Even if you know some karate moves, you can't take both of us." Kendra's stance shifted again, her weight distribution changing in ways that suggested she was far from finished. "You want to test that theory?" The challenge hung in the air between them, and for the first time since this confrontation began, Dylan felt a flicker of genuine fear. Not just fear of losing a fight, but fear of what that loss would mean for his reputation, his status, his carefully constructed identity as someone who was untouchable. "Connor," he said quietly, "when I say go, we both rush her at the same time." Connor nodded reluctantly, though every instinct was screaming at him to run. Kendra heard the whispered plan and felt the familiar calm that had always preceded her best martial arts performances. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "When you're outnumbered, make them come to you. Control the engagement." She was ready. "Go!" Dylan shouted. He and Connor rushed forward simultaneously, their plan simple but effective. Overwhelm her with numbers and force. Dylan aimed high, going for her shoulders to bring her down, while Connor went low, trying to take out her legs. But Kendra had been preparing for exactly this scenario through months of training with her father. As they charged, she stepped back and pivoted left, using Dylan's momentum to redirect him past her, while simultaneously bringing her knee up into Connor's solar plexus as he dove low. Connor crumpled, gasping for air, while Dylan spun around in fury. "You little—" he started, but Kendra cut him off. "Is that all you've got?" she asked, her voice steady despite her elevated heart rate. 3 years of varsity football, and you can't handle one girl who's been in a wheelchair for 6 months? The taunt hit its mark. Dylan's face flushed red with humiliation and rage. He looked around at his friends. Tyler still on the ground holding his ribs, Connor doubled over, trying to breathe, and realized that everything he thought he knew about power dynamics was crumbling around him. "You think you're so smart," he snarled, circling her now like a predator looking for an opening. "You think your little martial arts moves make you tough?" "I think," Kendra replied, rotating to keep him in view, "that you've never faced someone who actually knows how to fight back." Dylan feinted left, then came in fast from the right, swinging wildly. But his movements were driven by emotion rather than technique, telegraphed and clumsy. Kendra ducked under his swing and drove her palm up into his nose, not hard enough to break it, but enough to bring tears to his eyes and make him stagger backward. "My turn," she said quietly. What followed was less a fight than a demonstration. Years of martial arts training, months of focused rehabilitation, and a lifetime of controlled anger came together in a series of movements that were as precise as they were devastating. Dylan rushed her again, and this time Kendra didn't just evade, she met his charge head-on. She grabbed his outstretched arm, used his momentum to spin him around, and swept his legs out from under him. He hit the asphalt hard, the impact jarring through his entire body. Tyler had managed to get back to his feet and made another attempt to help his friend, but Kendra was ready for him too. As he approached from behind, she pivoted and caught him with a controlled strike to his shoulder that sent him spinning sideways and back to the ground. "Stop!" Connor gasped from where he was still trying to catch his breath. "Just stop!" But Dylan wasn't finished. Pride and humiliation drove him to his feet one more time, blood trickling from his nose, his Letterman jacket torn and dirty. "This isn't over," he wheezed, wiping blood from his face. "You think you've won something? You think this changes anything?" "Actually," Kendra said, not even breathing hard, "I think it changes everything." Dylan looked around at the scene, his two friends on the ground, his own disheveled appearance, and Kendra standing calmly in the center of it all, completely in control. The realization hit him like a physical blow. They hadn't just lost a fight. They'd been dominated, humiliated, reduced to exactly the kind of helpless victims they'd tried to make her. "You were recording this, weren't you?" he suddenly demanded, whirling to face Zoe. Zoe held up her phone, her face pale but determined. "Every second of it. Delete it. Right now." "No. Delete it, or You'll what?" Kendra stepped between Dylan and Zoe, her stance making it clear that any threat to her friend would have to go through her first. "Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough for one day?" Dylan's hands clenched into fists, his face a mask of frustrated rage. But as he looked at Kendra, standing tall, unafraid, clearly capable of defending herself and others, something fundamental shifted in his expression. The easy confidence that had carried him through years of unopposed bullying was gone, replaced by the dawning realization that his victims might not always stay victims. That's when the voice cut across the parking lot. "What's going on out here?" Ms. Rodriguez emerged from the school building, drawn by the sounds of the confrontation. She took in the scene with the trained eye of an educator who'd witnessed countless teenage conflicts. 3 boys in various states of dishevelment, 1 girl standing calmly beside an overturned wheelchair, and another girl holding a phone. "Everything's fine, Ms. Rodriguez," Dylan said quickly, trying to salvage some dignity from the situation. "Just a misunderstanding." But Ms. Rodriguez wasn't buying it. She'd seen Dylan's bloody nose, Tyler's pained expression as he held his ribs, Connor's labored breathing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the aftermath of a fight. "Miss Williams," she said, addressing Kendra directly. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Kendra replied calmly. "Better than fine, actually." Ms. Rodriguez noticed something that made her do a double-take. "You're standing." "Yes, ma'am. I've been working on my recovery." The teacher's gaze moved to the 3 boys, then to Zoe's phone, then back to Kendra. The pieces were falling into place, and she didn't like the picture they formed. "Miss Martinez," she said to Zoe, "I trust you have documentation of whatever happened here?" Zoe nodded eagerly. "Yes, ma'am. Everything." Dylan's face went white as he realized the implications. Video evidence of 3 boys attacking a disabled girl, even one who could defend herself, wasn't going to be explained away as a misunderstanding. "All of you," Ms. Rodriguez said with quiet authority, "are coming with me to the office." Now, as they made their way back toward the school building, Kendra walking steadily beside her retrieved wheelchair, the 3 boys trailing behind like defeated soldiers, Dylan finally understood that this wasn't just about losing a fight. He'd lost everything. The walk back to the school building felt surreal to Kendra. Her adrenaline was still coursing through her system, her hands trembling slightly from the confrontation, but her steps were steady and sure. Behind her, Dylan nursed his bloody nose, while Tyler and Connor limped along in defeated silence. Ms. Rodriguez led them directly to the main office, where the evening custodial staff looked up in surprise at the unusual procession. The fluorescent lights seemed harsh after the dim parking lot, casting everything in stark relief. "Mrs. Patterson," Ms. Rodriguez called to the secretary who was preparing to leave for the day, "I need you to contact Principal Hayes immediately, and we'll need to reach the parents of these 4 students." Vice Principal Johnson emerged from his office, having heard the commotion. His expression immediately shifted to one of controlled annoyance when he saw the group. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone suggesting this was an unwelcome interruption to his evening routine. "There was an altercation in the parking lot," Ms. Rodriguez replied. "Miss Martinez has it recorded." Johnson's eyes flicked to Zoe's phone, and Kendra caught a flash of concern cross his features. "I'm sure it's just another misunderstanding. You know how these things can get blown out of proportion." "Show him," Ms. Rodriguez said to Zoe. As the video played, Johnson's expression grew increasingly uncomfortable. Kendra watched him carefully, noting how he winced when Dylan yanked her from the wheelchair, how his jaw tightened when the boys advanced on her. "Well," Johnson said when it ended, his voice carefully neutral, "this is certainly unfortunate. But it looks like Miss Williams handled herself quite well. No real harm done." "No real harm done?" Ms. Rodriguez's voice rose with disbelief. "They assaulted her." "Now, let's not be dramatic. These are good kids who got carried away. I'm sure we can handle this with a simple disciplinary meeting." The office door burst open, and Principal Hayes strode in, his expression already grim from Ms. Rodriguez's urgent phone call. He was a tall, thin man who'd been principal for 15 years and prided himself on knowing everything that happened in his school. "Where's this video I need to see?" he demanded without preamble. Johnson stepped forward quickly. "Principal Hayes, I think we can handle this situation without—" "Show me the video." Hayes cut him off, his tone brooking no argument. As Hayes watched the footage, his expression grew darker with each passing second. When Dylan yanked Kendra from her wheelchair, Hayes's hands clenched into fists. When the boys taunted her about faking her disability, his face flushed with anger. "This is unacceptable," he said when it ended. "Completely unacceptable." "Sir," Johnson interjected, "I think if we look at this objectively, it's really just a case of teenage emotions getting out of hand. These boys have excellent records." "Excellent records?" Hayes turned to his vice principal with barely controlled fury. "Mr. Johnson, are you telling me this is the first time you've dealt with complaints about these students harassing Miss Williams?" The silence that followed was deafening. Johnson's face went pale as he realized the trap he'd walked into. "Well, there have been some minor incidents, but nothing that rose to the level of—" "Minor incidents?" Kendra spoke for the first time since entering the office. "I reported them stealing my wheelchair months ago. You told me it was just boys being boys." Hayes's attention snapped to Kendra, then back to Johnson. "You've been covering this up?" "I wasn't covering anything up," Johnson said defensively. "I was handling typical teenage conflicts through appropriate channels." "By ignoring them," Ms. Rodriguez added. "I tried to file a report about harassment I witnessed in my classroom. You discouraged me from documenting it." Hayes looked like he was having trouble processing what he was hearing. "How long has this been going on?" "Months," Kendra said quietly. "Since I started here. And it's been escalating because they knew nothing would happen to them." 20 minutes later, parents began arriving. Kendra's mother and father came first, Naya's professional composure cracking when she saw her daughter's torn jacket and scraped palms. "Are you hurt?" she asked, immediately checking Kendra for injuries. "I'm okay, Mom." "Really?" Marcus stood behind them, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. His daughter standing tall and uninjured, 3 boys looking defeated, and 2 administrators clearly in conflict. "Mr. Williams," Principal Hayes said carefully, "I want to assure you that we're taking this situation very seriously. I'm also learning that there may have been systemic failures in how previous complaints were handled." Johnson shifted uncomfortably as Dylan's parents arrived. His father, a large man in an expensive suit, who immediately began demanding explanations. "This is clearly a case of self-defense," Dylan's father declared loudly. "My son was attacked." "Mr. Reeves," Hayes interrupted, "I suggest you watch this video before you say another word." As the parents watched the footage, the room's atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Dylan's mother gasped. Tyler's father cursed under his breath. Connor's mother stared in horrified disbelief. "This is assault," Hayes said when it ended. "Against a student my administration apparently failed to protect." Johnson tried one last deflection. "Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. These are good kids who made a mistake." "Stop talking," Hayes commanded, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "You're done handling this situation. You're done handling any situation involving student safety." The weight of those words settled over everyone present. Johnson's face went white as he realized his career was effectively over. "This matter will be referred to the school board immediately," Hayes continued, "and we'll be contacting the police. Miss Williams, I owe you an apology that I can never adequately express." Kendra nodded, feeling a strange sense of vindication as she watched the system that had failed her finally acknowledge its mistakes. Justice, it seemed, had finally arrived. 3 weeks later, Kendra walked through the hallways of Cedar Ridge High School with a confidence that radiated from every step. She still used her wheelchair when she needed it, for longer distances or when fatigue set in, but the choice was hers now, not dictated by limitation or fear. The transformation had been remarkable. The video had gone viral within hours, bringing national attention to the school's handling of disability harassment. Justice for Kendra had trended for days, sparking conversations about bullying, disability rights, and institutional accountability across the country. The new anti-harassment policy passed unanimously last night, Zoe said, as they met at Kendra's locker. "My mom said the school board meeting was packed." "Good," Kendra replied, pulling out her chemistry textbook. "Maybe some real changes will finally stick." The aftermath had been swift and comprehensive. Dylan, Tyler, and Connor had been expelled and faced assault charges that would follow them to any school they tried to attend. Vice Principal Johnson had been terminated immediately, his 20-year career ending in disgrace. Principal Hayes had implemented sweeping policy changes and hired an outside consultant to review the school's entire approach to student safety. "How does it feel?" Zoe asked as they walked toward class. "How does what feel?" "Being the girl who changed everything." Kendra considered the question. Around them, students moved through the hallways with a different energy than before. There was more awareness, more respect, more understanding that actions had consequences. Teachers were more vigilant, administrators more responsive, and students more willing to speak up when they witnessed harassment. "It feels like I can finally breathe," she said. Ms. Rodriguez had been promoted to vice principal, her first act being the establishment of a student advocacy program. She waved at them from her new office, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "Miss Williams," she called out, "the reporter from Channel 7 confirmed your interview for this afternoon. Are you ready?" Kendra nodded. She'd become something of a reluctant spokesperson for disability rights, fielding interview requests from across the country. The attention was overwhelming sometimes, but she understood the importance of her story, reaching other students who might be suffering in silence. During lunch, Kendra sat with a group that had grown considerably over the past few weeks. Students who had previously been afraid to associate with her now sought out her friendship, drawn by her strength and authenticity. But it was the letter in her backpack that meant the most to her. "Read it again," Zoe urged. Kendra pulled out the handwritten note from a middle school student in Texas, whose video message had gone viral in response to hers. The girl had been facing similar harassment and had used Kendra's story as inspiration to speak up to her own administration. "Dear Kendra," she read aloud, "because of you, I found my voice. Because of you, I'm not hiding anymore. Because of you, 3 bullies at my school are facing consequences for the first time. Thank you for showing me that we don't have to stay victims. We can become warriors." "That's the 15th letter this week," Zoe observed. "I know. It's incredible." After school, Kendra found her parents waiting in the parking lot, the same parking lot where everything had changed 3 weeks ago. But instead of being a place of trauma, it had become a symbol of her transformation. "How was the interview?" Marcus asked as she approached. "Good." The reporter asked tough questions, but fair ones. "Any word on the college scouts?" Naya inquired. Kendra's newfound fame had attracted attention from adaptive sports programs across the country. 3 universities had already reached out about martial arts scholarships, recognizing not just her physical abilities, but her character and determination. "Virginia Tech called this morning," Kendra said with a smile. "They want to fly me out for a campus visit." As they drove home, Kendra reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 6 months ago, she'd been broken. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. The accident had taken so much from her, and the bullying had threatened to take even more. But sitting here now, stronger than she'd ever been, surrounded by family who loved her and friends who respected her, she realized something profound. She hadn't just survived her challenges. She'd transformed them into purpose. "You know," she said, as they pulled into their driveway, "I used to think the accident was the worst thing that ever happened to me." "And now?" Marcus asked. "Now I think it was the thing that showed me who I really am." That evening, as Kendra worked through her physical therapy routine in the garage, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. She saw someone who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. Someone who had turned victimhood into advocacy, pain into purpose, silence into strength. She was Kendra Williams. She was a survivor, a fighter, and a voice for those who couldn't yet find their own. And she was exactly where she belonged, standing tall, speaking truth, and proving that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is simply refusing to be broken by it. The girl who had once been defined by her wheelchair now defined herself by her unbreakable spirit. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.